Awesome. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We are Team Eco.
My name's Cameron.
I'm Harry.
I'm Gabby.
I'm Ashni.
And I'm Maya.
Awesome. And Major Sheehan and Colonel Villasenor are our sponsors. Our problem given to us is that whenever the U.S. military transports its fuel to supply its operations abroad, whether that be in the Indo-PACOM region, for example, there are vulnerabilities within that supply chain that are susceptible to enemy attack. And so we're currently seeing this pan out in the current Ukrainian crisis. While Russia is transporting its petroleum to power its operation, its military operation in Ukraine, Ukraine is attacking that long supply chain. So you're probably wondering, why does this matter to the U.S.? And this matters because it could deteriorate and our effectiveness and resilience when carrying out our future operations. So you see here, this is the timeline that we took. In the beginning, we were pretty idealistic in the sense, why don't we just use alternative energies to power our bases? And the issue with that is issues with viability. A lot of these technologies are still being prototypes in the works. So we reevaluate oil in March and we pivot back that way and looking at the vulnerabilities within our oil-based supply chain. And so the issue with that is our near-peer threat and adversary China, for example, is innovating military technology like hypersonic missiles that can destroy and attack that oil-based supply chain. So then our phase goals in April, we look at near, midterm, and long-term technology goals. And the issue with that is the DoD can't innovate these technologies rapid enough. And so the big issue that we want to focus on that we'll touch later is that there needs to be a DoD-centered solution focused on how we can rapidly innovate these technologies.
In mid-February, we came up with our first mission model canvas, which is a tool that groups can use to develop parts of our solution to create the end goal to a mission. We've blurred out everything, but we've taken the one thing that's really important that we want to take away from this is the value proposition. So we wanted to see what we actually could gain from what we were doing. So we wanted the ability for warfighters to easily understand the technology they were being given, be able to resupply technology accessibly, and give a more reliable and varied option for resupplying remote operations. As for our original MVP, a minimal viable product, we came out and tried to find out the initial problem. The supply chain for petroleum was very complicated, fragmented, and could potentially lead to a lot of vulnerabilities in the future. Vulnerabilities in remote operations can lead to a lot of dangers for soldiers being stuck out in open areas for a while. It can risk a lot of lives for these soldiers. So we needed to come up with a solution to this. To do this, we were going to introduce new practices and new technologies that would introduce alternative technologies that would be more reliable and reduce the number of vulnerabilities in the future.
And at this point, we pivoted. We began with this eco-friendly, climate change aligned initiative that was very idealistic and very unmanageable. And we realized from our interviews with our beneficiaries that trying to promote this kind of initiative was not going to be perceived as an investment for DoD stakeholders. And so we realized that coming up with a universal non-petroleum solution such as hydrogen, such as nuclear, or even microgrids at this point was not going to work. And so we gained from the interviews is that we recognized a disconnect between our warfighter and their needs, and then the desires of policymakers and military leadership. And that this disconnect disrupts the research and innovation process for our warfighters and military engineers. And so we took these ideas and we went to our second mission model canvas, which is focused on more of a practicality and strategic approach rather than a technological approach. And we put our focus on this point on our engineers, on our researchers, on our innovators within the DoD. And from our interviews with them, we came to realize that there's more opportunity for them to gain better usage out of their research from looking outside the DoD and focusing on dual use technologies.
Awesome. And some of those dual use technologies and our research into that made us come up with this technological framework. And so in the near term, we wanted to standardize our quality of petroleum And in the midterm, we wanted to implement base electrification through microgrids as a standard. And in the long term, we wanted to somehow incorporate alternative energies as a standard for our warfighting. And we wanted to do this in 2028, 2035, and 2050 respectively. And the roadblock that we ran into here was that these timelines were unrealistic and not agreed upon by everyone. And so we pivoted once again. And what we started to look at this point was what kind of solution will allow us to start creating realistic timelines, since we weren't able to create them now. And so what we looked at that point was how policy flows down from the congressional level to warfighters on the battlefield. And we realized that the inefficiencies in bureaucracy meant that it didn't look as simple as this. And what we really want to do with the solution that we'll present later is emphasize DoD leadership to create a streamlined approach that will simplify the process and make it look low.
So our proposal for streamlining this is to propose a streamlined, centralized mechanism that focuses on bringing in funding from outside the DoD and reinvesting it into public-private partnerships. So how could you do this? First, the DoD has to engage private capital. The DoD could leverage its existing credibility as a large buyer and its unique access to military markets to solicit funds. Then the DoD would reinvest these funds into existing and new public-private partnerships, either through new models or through previous successful models, such as the consortium model, in which the DoD hires an intervening company to go out and bring in other companies to each work on a separate aspect of a complex technological problem. There's already a group of companies who are willing to do this in alternative energy called the RISE Consortium, so it could easily be done. This community building will build the DoD's credibility in the private market and will allow it to solicit more outside funds, speeding up the pace of commercialization over time. And over time, the DoD will be able to procure large amounts of these technologies and rapidly transition the military into the future. So some of the benefits of this approach, right off the bat, you get greater funding from outside sources, which allows the DoD to immediately expand and create new public-private partnerships. In the midterm, the DoD can build a community of innovators, and each innovator can focus on a different aspect of this problem because the solution must be very complex to transition the military towards alternative energy. In the long term, this community will produce technologies and commercialize them to a point where they can be rapidly and on a large scale procured to mitigate current vulnerabilities in the supply chain and give the DoD the ability to rapidly adapt to future vulnerabilities as our adversaries innovate in their weapons technologies.
Our main takeaway from this semester was that the private sector is more innovative and productive than the DoD. However, there's poor communication between the two, just from what we've learned. So what we need to do is improve communication between the two and get them working together to help develop alternative energies and implement them into the Army. What this will do will reduce vulnerabilities in the future, introduce new sources of technology, and help with remote operations, in the end, saving lives. Thank you for listening.